Summer 1942. Adolf Hitler stands at the zenith of his power. France has fallen. The Wehrmacht seems invincible. Having survived the brutal Russian winter, his armies are once again on the march, driving deep into the Soviet heartland. In his field headquarters, Hitler stares at a map. His generals urge a singular, strategic objective: the oil fields of the Caucasus. Oil is the bloodline of a modern army, and Germany is running dry. This is Operation Blau. But Hitler's gaze is fixed on another target, a city on the Volga River, a city that holds no real strategic value, but possesses an intoxicating symbolic one. Stalingrad, the city of Stalin. To capture it would be the ultimate personal humiliation for his nemesis. To Hitler, the Soviet Union is a house of cards, already broken, ready to collapse with one final arrogant push. That push would be delivered by the German Sixth Army, over 300,000 strong, hardened by years of victory, commanded by the meticulous General Friedrich Paulus. As they marched across the sun-scorched steppe, confidence was absolute. A young German private, Wilhelm, writes in his diary, August 10th, 1942. The advance is rapid. The Russians flee before us. Morale is high. We are told Stalingrad will be the last major effort before the winter. We will be home by Christmas. But the city they were approaching was not just a name on a map. It was a crucible preparing to forge a new and terrible kind of war. And the arrogance of summer 1942 was about to be consumed by the greatest military disaster in human history. This is the story of Stalingrad, the ultimate catastrophe of Hitler's Reich and the definitive turning point of the Second World War. The assault began on August 23, 1942. It did not begin with tanks, but with a storm from the sky. General von Richthofen's Luftflotte 4 unleashed a bombing campaign of unimaginable ferocity. Over 1,000 tons of explosives fell on the city in 48 hours. The city, built mostly of wood, vanished. It became a sea of fire. 40,000 civilians died in the first day, a human toll that surpassed the entire British Blitz. The city was 90% rubble. To the German command, the battle was already over. But the battle had not even begun. From the inferno, Joseph Stalin issued Order Number 227. It was an order of pure, brutal desperation. Panic-mongers and cowards must be exterminated on the spot. Not one step back. This is our slogan. We must defend every position, every meter of Soviet territory to the last drop of blood. It was not a request. Behind the frontline defenders of General Chuikov's 62nd Army, NKVD barrier troops set up machine guns. Their orders: shoot any Soviet soldier who tried to retreat. Dmitri, a worker from the Red October tractor factory, now a private in the 62nd Army, recalled the moment. Quote, The sky was black. The city was gone. We had two choices: be burned by the Germans or be shot by our own. We chose to fight. We had nowhere else to go. The Volga was behind us. There is no land for us beyond the Volga. The German Sixth Army punched into the shattered city. The first assaults were overwhelming. The Germans captured the southern suburbs, rolled into the city center, and drove a wedge right to the Volga, splitting Chuikov's army in two. By mid-September, the Germans held 90% of the ruins. The Soviet bridgeheads were reduced to tiny, desperate pockets clinging to the river's edge.
But in those ruins, the nature of the war changed. The German doctrine of blitzkrieg, of rapid mechanized movement, died. A new kind of war was born. The Germans gave it a name, Rattenkrieg, the War of the Rats. This was not war. This was a primal struggle for survival in a landscape of hell, a three-dimensional battlefield of rubble, sewers, basements, and shattered skeletons of buildings. Life was not measured in kilometers, but in meters. A German lieutenant wrote, "The city is no longer a city. It is a mass of rubble and corpses. We are not fighting for a city, we are fighting for a graveyard." The focal points of the battle became legendary names, etched in blood. The grain elevator, a massive concrete silo in the south. A handful of Soviet defenders held out for 5 days against a full-scale armored assault. When the Germans finally took it, they counted 40 Soviet bodies. The defenders had run out of ammunition and then out of water. The Red October tractor factory. Here, workers repaired T-34 tanks on one side of the factory floor, while German infantry stormed the other. Freshly built tanks, sometimes without paint or gun sights, would drive off the assembly line and straight into combat meters away. And then there was Pavlov's house, a single apartment building overlooking a key square. A small platoon led by Sergeant Yakov Pavlov captured it and turned it into an impenetrable fortress. They surrounded it with minefields, knocked holes in the walls for machine gun nests, and held it for 60 days. 60 days they held that single building against daily, relentless German assaults. On German military maps, this one ruined house was marked as a fortress. The attackers suffered more casualties trying to take Pavlov's house than they did taking the entire city of Paris. This was the Rattenkrieg. Wilhelm, the German private, writes again. His confidence is gone, replaced by a cold dread. October 14th, we fight for every room. If we capture the kitchen, the Russians are in the living room. At night, they take it back. We are not men. We are rats in a sewer. The firing never, ever stops. God, let this end. This was a war of snipers. In the ruins, a single bullet could change a battle. The Soviet sniper Vasily Zaitsev became a national hero, credited with over 200 kills. The Germans flew in their own top sniper, Major Koenig, to hunt him. Their deadly duel in the rubble became a microcosm of the entire battle, a personal, patient, merciless war of attrition. General Paulus saw the meat grinder his army was trapped in. The Sixth Army was bleeding to death. He begged Hitler for permission to pull back, to consolidate. The Führer's reply was simple. Take the city, all of it.
As October turned to November, the world's attention was fixed on the inferno in the city, but the real story was happening far away from the rubble. In Moscow, General Georgy Zhukov, the man who had saved the capital, was planning. He looked at the map. He saw Paulus's Sixth Army, overextended, exhausted, and fixated on the city, and he saw its flanks. To protect their main thrust, the Germans had used their allies, stationed on the open, frozen steppe to the north and south of Stalingrad, were the Romanian Third and Fourth Armies. They were poorly equipped, poorly trained, and had almost no anti-tank guns. This was the weak link. For weeks, under a total media blackout, Zhukov and General Vasilevsky amassed an enormous, unseen force. 1 million men, 1,500 tanks, 1,300 aircraft, a tidal wave of steel hidden in plain sight. The operation was codenamed Uranus. On November 19, 1942, the first snow began to fall, and the trap sprang. A storm of Soviet artillery obliterated the Romanian lines to the north. Then the tanks attacked. The Romanian divisions didn't just bend, they evaporated. They ran, terrified, as Soviet T-34s poured through the gap. The next day the offensive struck the southern flank, with the same result. In his headquarters, General Paulus received frantic reports of a massive Soviet breakthrough, but he was ordered to stay put. This was, German command insisted, a minor diversion. It was not a diversion. It was a masterstroke. On November 23rd, just 4 days after the offensive began, the two great Soviet pincers met at the town of Kalach-na-Domu. The trap was shut. The entire German Sixth Army, along with elements of the Fourth Panzer Army and Allied units, was encircled. 300,000 Axis soldiers were trapped. The hunter had become the hunted. Hitler, in his mountain retreat, flew into a rage. He pounded the table. "I am not leaving the Volga. I will not surrender the city." The fate of 300,000 men was sealed by 2 men. First, Hitler himself, who forbade Paulus from attempting a breakout. "Hold at all costs," he commanded. "You will be supplied." Second, the head of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring. He made a boastful, impossible promise. He assured the Führer his air force could supply the Sixth Army from the sky. "My Führer," he bragged, "I guarantee the airlift." The trapped army required a minimum of 750 tons of supplies per day to survive. The Luftwaffe, in perfect conditions, might have managed 300. In the depths of a Russian winter, they would be lucky to deliver 100. It was not a rescue plan. It was a death sentence. The Kessel, the cauldron, was formed, and now the true enemy arrived. Not the Red Army, but General Winter. The temperature dropped to -20, then -30, then -40 Celsius. Dmitri, the Soviet soldier, recalled the cold. "We were used to the winter. We had our felt boots and our padded coats. We watched the Germans. They had nothing. Their summer uniforms were rags. They froze where they stood. The cold was our greatest ally. The cold killed them by the thousand. For the man in the Kessel, life ceased to be. It became a slow, agonizing descent into hell. The airlift was a catastrophic failure. On good days, a few dozen planes made it through the wall of Soviet anti-aircraft fire. Rations were cut again and again. Wilhelm's diary becomes a testament to the horror. December 10th. Food is gone. We have eaten the horses, all of them. Men boil snow, mixed with grease scraped from tank engines. Lice cover us. Dysentery is everywhere. Men die of it, or they die of starvation, or they simply lie down in the snow and do not get up. One last desperate hope remained. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, Germany's most brilliant tactician, assembled a relief force, Operation Winter Storm. On December 12th, his panzers began to fight their way toward the pocket. They advanced against suicidal Soviet resistance. They pushed and pushed until they were just 48 kilometers away. The trapped men in the Kessel could see the flares of Manstein's tanks on the horizon. They could hear the distant rumble of the guns. Salvation was there. Manstein radioed Paulus. He pleaded with him. "You must break out. Attack south. We will meet you. It is your only chance." Paulus, ever the obedient soldier, radioed Hitler for permission. The reply was the same. 9. Hold your position. The breakout never came. Manstein, his own flanks threatened, was forced to turn back. The flares on the horizon vanished. The last hope was extinguished. Wilhelm's final diary entry. January 10th, 1933. We are betrayed, abandoned by the Führer. There is no hope, no food, ammunition is gone. My fingers are black with frostbite. I cannot hold my rifle. I can barely hold this pencil. Let it end. Let it. His diary ends there. On January 8th, the Soviets offered terms of surrender. Paulus, bound by Hitler's order, refused. Zhukov then unleashed the final act, Operation Ring. A wave of Soviet artillery and tanks rolled over the frozen, starving, half-dead Sixth Army. It was no longer a battle. It was a liquidation. The Kessel, the cauldron, was torn apart. Its defenders annihilated. On January 30th, 1943, Hitler, in a final act of cynical delusion, promoted Friedrich Paulus to the rank of Field Marshal. The message was clear. No German field marshal in history had ever surrendered. It was a command to commit suicide. The next day, on January 31st, Field Marshal Paulus defied his Führer. He walked out of his headquarters in the basement of a ruined department store and surrendered. On February 2nd, the last pocket of German resistance fell silent. The battle for Stalingrad was over. The aftermath was an image from Dante's Inferno. The city, which had held 500,000 people, did not exist. The human cost was staggering, beyond comprehension. In just over 6 months of fighting, the battle resulted in nearly 2 million casualties, killed, wounded, or captured. It was the single bloodiest battle in human history. Of the 300,000 Axis soldiers trapped in the Kessel, only 91,000 were left to surrender. Starving, frostbitten, and broken, they were marched into Soviet captivity. The war was over for them, but their ordeal was not. Of the 91,000 prisoners who marched into the gulags, only 5,000 would ever see Germany again. Stalingrad was not just a battle. It was the turning point. Until this moment, the German Wehrmacht, the most terrifying military machine ever assembled, had seemed invincible. Stalingrad shattered that myth forever. Germany lost an entire army. It lost its best equipped, most experienced formations. It lost hundreds of aircraft, thousands of tanks and artillery pieces. These were losses they could never replace. But more than equipment, Germany lost the initiative. They lost the will to win. After Stalingrad, the Wehrmacht would never again mount a major strategic offensive on the Eastern Front. From this moment on, they would only react, only retreat. Dmitri, the factory worker who survived, put it simply. In 41, we fought for our lives. In 42, we fought for our city. In 43, we began to fight for victory. We knew after Stalingrad we would win. We knew we would go to Berlin. The arrogance of Adolf Hitler, his obsession with a symbolic city, had led his army into a trap of his own making. He had demanded a battle of annihilation, and he got one, the annihilation of his own Sixth Army. The long, bloody road to Berlin, the final downfall of the Third Reich, did not begin on the beaches of Normandy. It began here, in the frozen, blood-soaked rubble of a city on the Volga. It began at Stalin.